countries. So, Professor, you're a Simony Professor for the Public Understanding of Science and Professor of Mathematics, very specialized, and you had plenty of awards for your work there, and you're at the University of Oxford, not Cambridge, Oxford. In 2016, you became a Fellow of the Royal Society. I remind you, but you all know that Stephen Hawking is in the Royal Society, and in the old days, Newton and Darwin. And Michael Faraday, you had a prize after his name.
I do, yes, right.
No? Because he was a great scientist for popularization also in the old days. Well, I won't cite all your prizes. You appear on TV. You appeared in Mind Games on the BBC. And you write articles in the general press, which is a kind thing to do. I'm the editor-in-chief of Popular magazine. You understand why. Like The Guardian and Times. And your books, well, I suspect you have read some of them. But really, well, you had one recently published, and What We Cannot Know, which is something which should incite people to read. And of course, I suspect you heard about the music of primes, which made you famous, as well as Finding Moonshine, which was a little bit romantic. Well, the last thing I will say that Marcus is very proud of his business card, but you won't have any because I think he ran out of them, because he designed it, especially with a very special form, saying it can pave any surface, although it looks like a little ghost, and you can look at it in both ways. Marcus, please tell us how to spark scientific breakthrough in Europe.
Okay,
and
right.
After that, I will present you also.
Good, thank you very much.
You have 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay, right. 10 minutes to spark innovation in Europe. Here we go. I'm intrigued that maybe it's a Brussels strategy to have wine at lunchtime to stimulate innovation, but we'll try and fight through the haze of wine as well. I'm also intrigued to notice you've swapped these two pictures over. I think that the speakers look like they had horns coming out of the tops of their heads. So now I'm in a wild sea, which may be appropriate for this current climate. I think I've identified perhaps 3 borders which we may need to cross as universities. I'm really talking from my position as part of a university, how to, within a university structure, how can we help to stimulate innovation? I think the most significant border that we've had for decades is that universities have always been a little bit insular. We've heard already the idea of the ivory tower this morning, and it's a really different kind of atmosphere that in university to that, say, in business. It's a really different climate, and I think that that's one of the significant borders that's a lot of work has been done over the last few years in breaking down and getting an understanding of each other's different cultures. I think that certainly in Oxford, and I'm talking to many other universities, there's a lot of people employed to try and facilitate the connections between industry and universities. And I think that needs to be done more because I think there's still a little bit of a disconnect. Quite often, the challenge is that something extraordinary has been done within a pure academic context, which the academician doesn't actually realize has the potential for extraordinary impact on society. So actually part of my role as the Professor for the Public Understanding of Science is, in some sense, trying to bridge that gap between the scientific world and society at large so that I can try and help tell the stories of the great science that's happening in our academies, and maybe somebody spots, well, that's exactly what I need. But I think the other way around, the interesting challenge that industry is having, and often we might have the tools to answer that, but we don't realize that that's an interesting question. So I think, again, this idea of collaboration has been a significant one throughout the day. And I think the idea of dialogue and getting a dialogue going between these two worlds such that the border gradually begins to disappear I think that's what we all aim for in some sense in Europe, is a borderless place. I would say that we'd like to actually perhaps break down those borders between the university and the kind of perhaps industrial sector. In Oxford, we have, in my department, the mathematics department, we have something called OCIAM, which we get every year, people from industry coming in and just saying, what are the things, challenges you have that you would like solved? And sometimes we throw up our hands and say, yeah, we don't know either. But time and again, we say, well, that's an interest. I've never thought of that particular problem, and actually I think I can help. So I think it's about sharing our ideas, both our challenges and what we've actually done. And within our department, the department for maths, physical sciences, and life sciences, we have people who are specifically there to try and sort of facilitate these connections. And we have an innovation company which is trying to realize the things that we're doing and making them perhaps profitable for the university. And I think an interesting discussion will be to explore, well, how much, when somebody has a big idea, what are the challenges of how much does a university own that idea, and how much can they go off on their own and create their own companies, or are there tensions there within a university structure that we need to address in order to sort of facilitate that? But I think there's been a lot of concentration on trying to encourage scientists within universities to think entrepreneurially, to be aware of these issues. But I would stress that there is an important thing about keeping a difference between these two institutions. Why does somebody stay within a university structure and not go out and become a businessman, a woman, somebody who's going out to perhaps start a company up? Why does somebody stay in the academic world? What's different about that from the sort of world of business and innovation? I would say that one of the important things is that the drive for a pure scientist is just that thirst for knowledge and curiosity. And very often they will not have the mindset to say, okay, yeah, and how can I use this? I think utility was talked about earlier. I think we have to be very careful about infusing universities just with this ethos of utility for society. That's not where the best innovation comes from, the great discoveries made in, I think, a scientific community. So I think we need to make sure that we don't try and make universities like businesses. Often it's because that's very often too short-termism. At the moment we have government in the UK trying to decide particular directions for universities, and I think that's a mistake. I think if you look at all of the great examples of things that created amazing innovation, Google came out of the idea of eigenvalues of matrices. It was not invented to try and create Google. RSA security comes out of properties of prime numbers. Nobody was exploring those properties of prime numbers because they wanted to make a code. They were just curious about that. So actually, we've heard this kind of term, the ivory tower, as a kind of rather derogatory term, and I would say, be careful. Don't throw it away completely. There is some value in valuing academics and scientists who love just pursuing things for their own sake. So it's the way to try and exploit those great discoveries that they're just looking at, maybe not for any particular application. I think talking to some of the people in Oxford before I came here about what are the challenges for a university, one of the things that they said was when often we have one of these ideas, there isn't the resources within the university to actually experiment and try things out. A postdoc needs to make their name as an academic and doesn't want to spend time on somebody else's idea necessarily, wants to work on their own idea. So I think that there's a real challenge within universities. Within a company structure, it's so many engineers that can work on a particular project, but that's not how a university is actually set up. So I think in order to be able to facilitate actually expanding on the ideas, there's a useful collaboration that can go on there, I think. The second barrier, I think, which has come up already, actually, which is an inter-subject barrier. Within my own university, I think it's very interesting that we are in a department structure, so we have the mathematics department, the physics department, the chemistry, the biology, the history, the geography, the music, and actually, I think the low-lying fruit where all of the exciting discoveries are going to be made are in the borderland between these subjects. So again, I think that's almost like a problem of the European community of different languages. That's also a challenge for us. We have very different languages across the sciences. As a mathematician, I try and talk to a biologist. I almost don't understand what they're saying. It's sort of a very different mentality. So I think that's another interesting border that we need to work on to try and create connections across different disciplines. I think nearly every education system across the world does this mistake, I think, of compartmentalizing education. As soon as you get out of primary school into secondary school, you're doing subjects in isolated ways. So trying to break that down, I think, is really important. And the Oxford structure actually tries to do that because we have a kind of department and also a college level. So when I go into my college, new college, I actually interact with a lot of people across many different disciplines, not just science. So I don't spend my time with mathematicians all day. I will talk to historians, geographers, roboticists, biologists, and that's, I think, very healthy. And in fact, we tried to even develop that further with something called the Oxford Martin School for 21st Century Challenges, which is trying to bring people from different departments who will have different skills to work on some of the world's great challenges. And I think if you look at some of the great innovations, I mentioned RSA, the security that's used on the internet to protect your credit cards. That was actually part of a similar sort of structure at MIT, which said, well, we want the mathematicians to talk to other people. So they created a structure which allowed collaboration across subjects. And so the R, S, and the A are three people from completely different disciplines who had the ability to talk to each other and actually see that they had combined skills. So again, this idea of collaboration, I think, is extremely important. We talked about STEM a little bit, but I would push this further and say it needs to be STEAM. It's not just a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's also the arts as well. The arts have I haven't heard very much talked about the importance of the humanities to innovation, and I think actually the whole idea of asking new questions is often the key to sparking new breakthroughs, and I think that's one of the things that we need to encourage. My third barrier is actually a barrier between universities. We heard this morning from the MEP how wonderful Cambridge is. And I think there's a terrible urge to have competition between universities, which I don't think is healthy. Oxford and Cambridge has a very big tradition of competition. But actually, I think that, I could say, well, Oxford came first in the Times Educational Supplement, Times Educational list of rankings of universities. But I think this is absolutely crazy. You can't take a multi-dimensional beast like a university and put it on a linear scale. Any way you do that, you'll find that different linear scales will give you different leading universities. So I think this needs to be, competition is not healthy, I think, between universities. Competition does stimulate innovation, but the competition for a university is more on a personal level. I think that the competition is wrestling with a particular problem that you're interested in, or wanting to get your name on something. But even that personal competition, I think, is slightly dangerous. That I think the more collaboration we have on projects, I think probably the best example of breaking down all of these is somewhere like CERN. CERN is not a place which is about a particular university, a particular country. It's about people working together, collaborating, and actually making breakthroughs for the sake of making breakthroughs. And the innovation that's come out of that desire for basic knowledge has had massive impact on different things. I'm out of my 10 minutes, so I've got lots of more things to say. But
1 minute.
1 more minute. Okay, right, great. So those are my three borders. I'll say a couple of other things which are about what can we do to stimulate scientists to have breakthroughs. My own thing that I benefited from was after my postdoc, usually scientists go into jobs which a massive amount of teaching and administration, and it kills their research. I was very lucky to have from the Royal Society something called a University Research Fellowship, which gave me 10 years of research time. What's really important is to take risk to create innovation. And I think business, it's very difficult to take risk because difficult to fail. But actually, failure is really important. And I think if you don't create an environment within a university to allow people to fail, I love Beckett's statement, fail, fail again, fail better. That's the secret to discovering something really great. And that 10 years of research that I had of protected time by the Royal Society gave me the space to fail a lot, but then to make something really great. Well, I think it was quite good. Anyway, the other thing is we talked a little bit about the idea of this elephant in the room, which is Brexit. I think that we need to actually, and we're talking about Europe, and I think actually we need to break out of this. It's an insular way of thinking about it. Europe's quite big, but actually if you look at it on that little map that we had earlier, it's still quite small, and there's a huge amount of the world out there. My belief, it's connectivity, not geography, which is the key to our destiny. And I think actually we need to think much more forward that the way that universities, people will work is about connections. And it's not about, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about locality and regions. I think this is a very old way of thinking, and we need to break out of it. Because, and I think Estonia is a good example, because Estonia is a kind of virtual state which is thinking not about something sort of about a country, it's thinking much more broadly. And I think that I've been involved in a startup which is an internet math school called mangahigh.com. The people we work with are all over the world. We have people in Brazil, we have people in India, in Ukraine, and there's no problem with this. We don't think of this as a company in a region. It doesn't exist anywhere. I mean, there is an office in London, but that's its structure is much. It's a different kind of world, and I think perhaps we need to break out of this idea of everything being about geography. I think connectivity is the key to our destiny. Thank you.
Thank you. So, near me, Professor Pascal Lemasson. You're a professor at Mines ParisTech, which is part of PSL Research University, which counts, 33 Nobel Prizes. 33, well, in the long run, of course. That. And we have to check. And 10 Fields Medal. It's a university which gathers multiple disciplines with a transdisciplinary perspective. And it's ranked number 3 in the 2015 Times Higher Education ranking. You see what we look at. On the most innovative university. You are also professor of the chair of design theory, and methods of innovations. Well, we expect a lot from you. And you are director of the Center of Management. Management of Science. How do you manage to do all that? You'll tell us, because you collaborate with several big companies with your team, like Airbus, Dassault Systèmes, Renault, SNCF. I won't enumerate all of them. Near you, Dr. Carles Puente. You're the co-founder at Fractus Antennas. Fractus, well, mathematician behind. You're in charge of innovation management, and the mobile industry has adopted quite a lot of your innovation creations. You're a professor at Barcelona Tech, and you collaborate also with other schools, business schools like Penn Wharton, ESADE. You were awarded in 2014, you and your team, the IST Grand Prize by the European Commission. And you told me, you have 145 patents.
That's right.
About that. And you told me that in the old days, you managed to meet Benoît Mandelbrot, who was the guy behind the fractals. And he had an entrepreneurial mind, in fact, although he's considered as a maverick and as having invented somebody nobody understood at some point, and you made it in a success and in a successful enterprise. So how did you do? You sparked a scientific breakthrough in a way already with fractals.
In a way.
Explain what you did a little bit.
Talking about how get these innovations going. Actually, I was a student when I had the idea of using fractals, which were developed by Professor Mandelbrot in the 80s, to make antennas. So I was not in a research program. I was not in a research institute or whatever. I was a student. And I had this idea about using fractals to make antennas. And I remember that day I dreamed that sometime I might be a scientist working on this. And it happened to be many years after, and after going to the US and many circumstances. So I had the opportunity to a little bit dedicate part of my life to make research in the field of fractal antennas, which then became a company. Okay, and the company with Fractus that we have created and has been innovating for the mobile industry for the last 15 years. Okay, so a little bit, I would like to say that was not planned. Okay, that was a little bit something that happened. Of course, happened in the right place, in the right environment, at the right time. Okay, but was something that was not really planned.
I recall what was said by one of the panelists this morning, saying that investors, they invest not in idea, but in companies. And Mr. Minister of Estonia told me, well, that's not true. We are investing in people. Well, they agree. As a manager of science, you told me that we have to find the real seeds of ideas. And that's what's difficult, to spark, because it will take a long time. So give us advice, or give them advice. Well, you're allowed to do it.
I wouldn't dare to do so. But it's true that one thing we study in innovation management today, or in design theory, it's to understand things when they are not yet here. So not the big things when they are already emerged, but just when they are emerging. One of the critical issues in innovation is dealing with the unknown, is coping with unknown. And what is interesting is that in a lot of sciences, when we discuss about the desire of scientists, what they are doing is precisely to deal with the unknown. They are looking for a desirable unknown, and they try to give it shape to it, to give form to it with all their techniques, all their tools, all their formal models. And even for VC, in a sense, you could say that what they're looking for is this desirable unknown, things that are going to emerge. Because when they come, when things are here, in a sense, it's too late. Yeah. When it's known, the business is already finished, in a sense. So this is the things we study in design theory, is to understand the, you could say, the structures of the unknown.
And so what are the things to avoid? What are the mistakes to avoid? I think everybody is wondering about that before knowing exactly what to do, because it seems that there are plenty of things to do. So what shouldn't people, institutions, not do?
There is a beginning of an answer to your question is given by cognitive science, because a lot of studies have been done recently on how people think in the unknown. And one of the main phenomena that is known today is that, in a sense, individually or collectively in the unknown, we are not good. We are fixed. It is said we are fixed. We tend to all imagine the same thing at the same moment. If you do creativity exercise, you have a lot of, you have the impression to have a lot of ideas, but finally all these ideas are more or less in the same topic. And the main obstacle is fixation. And in a sense, if something has to be organized and managed, is the capacity to overcome fixations. And often in science, the capacity to say, no, be careful here, we are using a model that is not a relevant one. And maybe here we should think differently about what is a geometry, or think differently about what is a set, or what is a number. And suddenly this capacity to say, everybody seems to look at numbers as real number, for instance, but what about a number whose square is negative? And suddenly people say, we don't know. And in a sense, this is a fixation, and this scientist is precisely in the position to overcome fixations. So fixation is often a critical obstacle.
Are you talking about people working already at the university, in institutions of research, or do you think what you're telling us can be applied at the very lowest level for younger children who are 2 or 3? Should it be done there to start with?
Here again, you should look at very interesting studies done in psychological studies on how children too are victims, we could say, of fixations, and how teaching, education finally help children to overcome their own fixations. And there are interesting studies done by my colleagues in Sorbonne University in the Laboratory of Psychology of Development, led by Olivier Houdet, on the fixations at children age.
Well, we understood.
Range.
Now we have to fight fixation. What do you think about that, Marcus? I bet you agree.
Well, I certainly think any scientists, the things that we know are exciting, but actually it's the things that we don't know which are what get us up in the morning. And
That's why you wrote about it.
well, actually, my book is about what science may never be able to answer. Are there any problems which, by their nature, we can never know the answer? Which is kind of like they're the kind of dangerous things for a scientist.
Yeah, but
and I
maybe
think,
we stay on the border.
well, I think the interesting mindset actually of most scientists is that science potentially could know it all, and that you need to go in when you're. Actually, it's interesting when you talk about psychology, because with my PhD students in Oxford, I actually spend probably 50% of my time not talking about mathematics, but doing psychology. My wife's a psychologist, so I sort of pick up tips from her. But the challenge of facing the unknown, up to that point, they've had exam questions which have had answers to, and they know there's an answer, and suddenly they're being faced with having to go into the unknown. But that is an opportunity for any scientist. The things that we don't know are the exciting things, and I think that's why there's a kind of synergy between the academic and the venture capitalist who is looking for the new opportunity. It's not about, once something, as you say, is in the market and it is growing, they're out. They want the next new thing. And it's always, if you're in the stock market, you're trying to look for the thing that nobody's spotted. You want to go against the trend. That's where you're going to make your mark. And so I think there's an interesting similar mindset, which means that actually maybe we understand each other more than many believe.
Carles, you went from very specialized and theoretical things to being an entrepreneur. So what were your failures? What were your mistakes? And what were your success? Because he explained that you have to fail and fail better. So did you fail?
Well,
And learned at the same time?
well, yes, we did. I mean, when we started the company, we thought that because we had this new technology, fractal antennas, and there was a demand for the properties of these antennas, the multiband behavior, the small size, which fitted very well the market of mobile telephony. We thought that, well, the company was going to be successful in a year. And actually, it took 9 years for the company to get to positive numbers, which was really painful. Having all the venture capitalists waiting for results, and those results that were not coming, and for many different factors. I mean,
And then you were helped, maybe not only by your family, as Professor from Catalonia was talking this morning. You were helped by the government, you were helped by the region, you were helped somehow by university?
well, I mean, in Spain, in Europe, we have some sort of programs that support the research, which are helpful to companies as well. But it's really, I mean, if you had, I mean, the breakthrough idea is just a part of the success. Okay, you have to develop the idea. You need to get the idea to make it something useful, to make it something that has really an economic impact. Okay, and the path from the idea to the success is full of many obstacles and many things that you need to overcome. And what is really important there is that you have a team of people at the company, at your organization, that is really committed, that is really supportive, that is really engaged to pushing forward and going through all the obstacles. Okay?
So
This is why VCs invest in people. Okay, because the idea by itself is not enough. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying that it's not enough.
So boldness and psychology creeps in the conversation.
But I'm interested, your career path, you started, very classically researcher in university, and then you left university to set up this company. So do you think there's a danger that the excitement of startups and becoming an entrepreneur could cause a kind of brain drain, the glamour of kind of industry and thing, that actually the fundamental researchers, we lost you in some sense for 9 years, or did we? Did you keep a sort of connection to universities? You're back now.
I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm back now.
Welcome.
After 9 years being full-time at the company, I decided to come back, and now I combine my work at the university with the work for the company. So we have a research contract between the university and the company that helps in making all things going together. I don't think that there is a risk for that. I think that it's very much enriching. I mean, the experience of being first a pure scientist at the university and then an entrepreneur, when I have come back to the university, that enriches much my interaction with the students. And I'm teaching about patent and technology management at Barcelona Tech, and it's really motivating for me to explain based from experience, from what I had to learn at the company from experience, and the students really appreciate that. So I don't think it's a risk. I think it's enriching to go to cross borders, okay, go from the university to the industry, back to the university, back and forth. I think all that is very positive.
I want to come back to the exact wording of our roundtable, because I would like to know whether you think that there's a real need to spark more scientific breakthroughs. Are there a lot of breakthroughs which are happening but not succeed in a way? But it seems that a lot of universities or institutions do find a lot of things everywhere all the time. You know, when you're a journalist, we are loaded with news, fantastic news from the labs. So what do you think of this round table? Because it's in the middle of something which deals with clusters, which deals with money and finance and economy, and
I certainly think
you're telling another story.
No, I think we're not saying that there are amazing breakthroughs being made, and it's about making sure that's maintained and not interfered with. So I think there's a danger when, for example, the UK government tries to identify 8 important areas that we are going to invest in for the future, 8 scientific areas. Well, that is a very dangerous decision, because it excludes a lot of innovation that will happen in other areas which is unexpected. The really exciting stuff is the unexpected stuff, and that's why I think what you need to do is create an environment to allow people to play, to take risks, to go off in strange directions, not to try and manage them on a short-term basis. And something like, I think all of these measures are really dangerous. So we've already heard them, you're third, I'm first. It's just all so ridiculous, and because that's not the real measures. We have this thing, the research excellence framework, where every sort of few years we have to sort of look at our research output and try and show its impact. And so what the effect of that is, it completely changes the focus of research, because everything has to be thought of, okay, we've got to do it in 2020, and we've got to try and, so all of our research has to be sort of focused on this, and suddenly you're having this short-termism means that you're not taking risks on the big projects. So I think it's about keeping that environment which allows for exciting things coming unexpectedly.
Pascal Lemasson, you would have a remark on that?
Yes, because in a sense it's true. We tend to think we need this scientific breakthrough, and maybe an answer would be no, we don't need scientific breakthrough as such. What we need is a scientific breakthrough that is giving us more richness, welfare, maybe intellectual emancipation, a capacity to better understand the world we are living in. But in a sense, a breakthrough as such has no meaning. So what is important is to understand the relationship between scientific exploration, this exploration of the unknown, and all the form of entrepreneurship that will take it over later, that will transform this in new activities, that will transform it into new social values. So this is not only science as such, but the relationship between science and the rest of the society.
So as scientists, even if you have a, let's say, hard science background, to political people, what would you recommend? Because that's what they always after. They want to understand where they should invest, whether they have to be more nationalistic and specialized in 8 areas, as you mentioned, or not, and how many scientists should they have?
I tell you, I think
What must be the budget? What does this 3% in the GDP mean?
I think it's come up quite a few times, but I talked to one of the big venture capitalists in London about what they look for example, the Founders Forum, and they said, we're not looking at the project, we're looking at the people. The project doesn't really matter. I'm looking for a team of people coming to me, and they often want a team. They don't want one person with a great idea, and they're looking for the people. This is actually, the project doesn't matter. We'll find them something else, which if that one doesn't work. But we're seeing the way they're thinking. That's the same with universities. Don't try and tell us what to research in. Give us the space to actually, you know, we've got great researchers to do what we do best.
I agree. I mean, there is this debate between, and this morning in one of the panels, well, about whether specialization or not specialization is important. These 8 areas that the UK government is going to invest, is that good or bad? Well, I don't think that there should be a controversy on this. I mean, yes, specializing and getting emphasizing some areas might be good, but you need to have, in addition, a space for the free development, for admission research and guided research, so that people just create something from scratch, from nothing. So both things are okay. But what I believe it's important also is that if there is a focus on some special areas, some specialization, that comes from bottom up, not from top down.
Yeah.
So you see where your people is good at, and then you let them grow. You just don't decide where people needs to be good at, and then you put money and expecting that the people jumps into that. I believe it's more this bottom-up method than this top-down.
I think this idea of the sort of vertical and horizontal is very interesting about specialization and generalism. I made a program for about intelligence, and we were looking for what makes a genius. You know, that's what we're all after, trying to find the genius. And I went to the University of, it was a university in America, and they were collecting brains of great scientists to try and identify what it was about their brains that made them great scientists. And what was interesting was that they found that they had kind of a lot of local connectivity. So it was almost like a very vertical network within the brain. And I said, well, you know, perhaps the genius would be that one that combines that with the kind of, because they'd had to sacrifice somehow the global connections across the brain. So they weren't making sort of out of the box, maybe, they were very focused in their way of thinking. And they said, well, yeah, there are brains like that, which have quite a lot of global connectivity, but you can't have both in a brain. It's almost a capacity problem that it's very difficult to have a brain which has both very focused local and this global behavior. But I think the challenge therefore is, well, yes, but you can combine brains. And so one person, and I think that this is the point, we mustn't try and make the specialist in mathematics try to be an entrepreneur as well, and draw their time away from the need that they have to be deep down in that mine, trying to knock out this mathematical problem. If you're bringing them up all the time to learn too many sort of broad skills, they're not going to be able to find that seam of gold down there. What you can do is to create those collaborations with people who have those skills, and provided you start to get an understanding between those, by combining the brains, you can get depth and breadth.
So how was said this morning, and you repeat it, there's a need in education of knowing how to build a team and work together, which is not always the case in our educations. Well, at least in France, there are some experiences somewhere, but not everywhere. Am I right or wrong?
Yes, for France certainly, but I would like to build on this idea. What is known to be important is that when people take risk, what do they learn in a sense? We have to consider that risk is something natural, and in a sense we are all quite frightened by the unknown, and it's a natural and logical reaction. And the point is, what does it mean to learn something on how to explore? Does it mean that we have reduced the unknown, which is in that case some of a pity, because now there is no unknown at least? What is interesting is that, can we learn to go in the unknown? And the answer is, of course, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have schools for designers. We have school of arts. We have school for creation. So it means that those guys learn something. And what do they learn? It's interesting. So there has been study to understand what people who are supposed to be creative do learn when they become creative. And they become a certain form of reasoning. They learn a certain way of looking at the unknown, of being accustomed to it, step by step, create some possibilities, avoid to be fixed immediately on one single solution, to be sure to be robust to all these uncertain events in the future. So could be that teaching, education, could be made more robust to help people be more rigorous and logic in front of the unknown. And maybe here we could learn much more than we think from creativity schools. Because in a sense today for engineers, for entrepreneurs, we tell them, well, take risk. Well, can we teach them to take risks logically? To take the right risks? To have a kind of robust reasoning in the unknown, a capacity to look at diverse solutions, to avoid to do what everybody at the same time at the same moment on all over the world, on the planet. So in a sense, we know now that there are certain structure of the unknown, and maybe we could teach people to react in front of the unknown with a form of rigor.
I think that relates to my kind of second border in a way between subjects. And I mean,
Absolutely.
I got asked by Wired magazine to send a postcard back from the year 2024 about my kind of dream for what this was in 2014. It was 10 years ahead. And my dream was a complete shift in the education system, that actually nobody ever said, oh, I'm doing A-levels in maths, physics, and history, or I've done these particular subjects. That we just, this idea that when we go to secondary school, suddenly subjects become compartmentalized. And actually that stops this idea that there are different ways of thinking which are really helpful in what you're doing, and to break down the borders between these subjects. So suddenly people were just saying, well, I've got a diploma in education, and they understood that, well, in music, there's a lot of mathematics bubbling underneath there. It's all about mathematical structures. The history of science is a really important way about making progress into the future. If you understand how breakthroughs were made and changes were made, how do we change our view of what an atom actually looks like? To understand those progresses helps you into the future. I think that that would be my dream, and I think it relates exactly, as well, again, coming back to the humanities and the arts playing an important role in, I spend a lot of time with creative artists, and they asked me questions about my subject that I hadn't even thought were questions that were worth asking.
That's the dream of a scientist. And the political people tell us that changing the whole system of education is the worst thing you can think about. can topple a government. Do you have questions? Yes. Can you wait for the microphone?
Yes, my name is Gareth Jones. I'm from Imperial College London, and I'd like to ask the panel to think a little bit more and reply, please, about what they think the role of fundamental science is and to what extent should it be supported. My field is physics, and it's a very fundamental part of physics that I work in, and I worked at CERN, and I know tremendous things have come out from CERN. But if you look back at history, I think we can gain a lot from seeing how fundamental understanding has led to transformative changes in the whole world. The best example is the research of Michael Faraday, and you probably know the story. When he was asked by the Prime Minister, what is the good of all this? He said, well, one day your exchequer might tax it,
Yeah.
which was true. And, but of course it led on not just to everything to do with electrical technology, but it led on to wireless. Wireless is both an old word and a very modern word, which is the key to interconnectivity now. Another example is the early work on trying to understand atoms, which was done by Röntgen, and he accidentally found a way of taking a picture which showed the bones. Now, just 6 weeks later, after he published, there were advertisements in Nature advertising machines to sell to hospitals to examine bones. And that was an example from 100 years ago of how quickly fundamental science can turn into real money. Another example, of course, is the World Wide Web, which came directly out of work at CERN, which has transformed society. My own interest at the moment is something called dark matter, so I've been spending 20 years searching for dark matter, and maybe nothing will come out of it. But it could be very important. We never know. The problem is that these are the things that inspire young people in order to devote their lives to subjects like this, which may turn out to be crucially important.
I think it's not a question. You've already answered, haven't you?
Well, I think that was.
You can comment,
Well,
Marcus.
I think that was the fundamental message I was trying to impress on people, is that the drive for knowledge for its own sake, and that involves a lot of risks and failures. It may take a long time to know what dark matter is, and the applications can also take a long time. You mentioned some very quick ones, but I think that's the real danger with. Perhaps today is we get all caught up in the excitement of all the interesting tech things and entrepreneurial things that will come out of it, and we forget to value those people who are discovering things which do have massive impact, and you could never predict those things, I think.
But as you said, it lasts 25 years or 50 years. And when we think about Darwin, he took a long time before he wrote about what he found. So, the question of timing, you were constantly repeating his short-term way of thinking, but it's maybe
we need to value what universities do well and what business does well, and there are ways to combine those. But I think we need to be very careful that we don't lose what universities, the difference between a scientist who pursues challenges of dark matter just purely because they want to know what it is. Out of that, if we discover it, I'm sure will come amazing sort of other things.
Yeah, what you mentioned, sorry, Pascal, you mentioned that you had 10 years to think in a way because of what the Royal Society gave you,
Yeah.
and you weren't obliged to teach at that time. Afterwards, you like to teach now, but you had time to pursue your interest, as we say.
And this was actually something, I've been dissing government a bit, but actually the government put the money in and recognised that this was a good investment. Every year we have 40 of us university research fellows, and the evidence, so that was in the sort of early 90s when there was a big brain drain happening to America, and it was their attempt to try and stop that happening. We might need a similar thing now with Brexit, but it actually now, the evidence is that that investment in those people has really benefited. They're all leaders now
Yeah,
of
yeah.
groups, research groups across the university sector, with encouraging new young people through. So I think that's a very key moment, is when you're about to 30 to 40, you're at your most productive as a scientist. You've got to the edge, and then suddenly most people are slammed with having to run a department or do their teaching, and that's the place to give space and invest. And it doesn't cost a lot of money for a government, and I think it's had massive payback.
But one must be careful. At 70 or 80, maybe you can have good ideas too. Different
Yes,
ones.
I'm hoping.
Pascal.
I was wondering, coming back to your comment, was wondering whether there might be a kind of trap here, because we tend to justify fundamental research by potential applications, whereas in a sense what is important is dark matter. In a sense, we could say it's interesting as such, almost independently of any application. And the trap is true for the others. If you take engineering design as a form of applied science, immediately you have a form of devaluation. So it's only applied science, it's less important than. What is interesting in both people are addressing unknowns. They are unknown in dark matter and they are unknown in radioscopy and this kind of devices. So in a sense they are both designing, and the point is, how do they collaborate? What are the form of solidarity between all those guys? How do they work together? Coming back to the question of group and people, the point is, how do we at the same time encourage them to explore their own unknown and still help them to collaborate, avoiding this kind of funnel and application which we all know doesn't work?
I
Which
agree.
is more a question.
I think we shouldn't fall into this trap of creating a debate between fundamental science or applied science or engineering. Do we need to invest in fundamental science? The answer is yes. Do we need to invest in applied science and engineering and innovation? Yes. So there shouldn't be a contradiction and a debate between the two. That's my
And
perspective.
innovation in organization, as you
Absolutely.
say.
I'll just make it very short, come back on that. One of the things which has impressed me is that in order to do these experiments at CERN, which are very big, very difficult experiments, in order to do them, you have to develop new technology, really new technology. And that's groundbreaking technology, not just science. And that has, I think, great benefits in itself, whether it's going to result in new pure knowledge or new applications. But they both go together very closely.
It's true that to emphasize the point, in organization science, the question of the how do CERN organize is a kind of maybe anomaly or enigma, because there is a form of collaboration between scientists from different disciplines and between engineers from different disciplines too, and funding, etc., etc. So it's a kind of extraordinary collaborative enigma.
Question? Don't speak too quickly, otherwise I do not understand you.
Okay.
The Dubliner.
Okay, so Chris Keeley from Trinity College. I think it's a fantastic debate, and I agree with Marcus 100%. I mean, we want our best people doing the unknown, because that's where the real return is. But the challenge, I think, that we have as a society is that, we have all these geniuses doing great things, and we have got that. What about the people who are not so genius, who go through the university system, who won't make the big breakthrough? What do they do on the Saturday and Sunday? We have to make sure our best people get the best funding and the best opportunity to make the best breakthroughs. But as a system of education, we have to make sure that other PhDs and doctors who maybe won't get a cure for cancer can still contribute to society in a very beneficial way. So how do we balance that up, Marcus? That's the question. I agree with you totally. I know what you're saying. I'm give you lots of money, take my money, no problem. But the people who aren't so good as you, how do they fit into the ecosystem?
I think one of the important things that you say a mathematics education does is a way of thinking. So it gives you tools to be able to be very flexible, and so I think that that's what will come out of the people who are doing perhaps those. And I think again we suffer from this just thing about utility. I mean, maths education in schools, I think, is so bad because governments think, well, we have to teach maths which is useful, and so they think it's solving quadratic equations and doing sines and cosines. But I challenge you, how many of you have actually solved a quadratic equation in your everyday life? It's just not. Oh, right, well, there's one down there. So I think that so we actually miss out on really big stories, the big ideas, which actually don't look so useful, but it would actually stimulate a way of thinking. We were talking last night about Chinese mathematical education, which I always sort of sing praises about because mathematical education is valued in China in a way that people in Britain have a terrible tendency to say, oh, I was rubbish at maths, as if it's a badge of honor. But what was interesting, teasing out, talking about Chinese education is, well, the trouble is that they're very good at passing tests, but actually they don't have the skills once the problem changes to kind of shift outside of that and adapt. So I think it's important that big ideas and fundamental research can actually help to train a way of thinking which will be absolutely essential for those going into the workplace to adapt to new situations which don't fit the equation that they learned in university.
The lady, fourth row.
Hi. Can I go back to the topic of the whole workshop, which is a relationship between academia and industry? And I understand from some stats that the returns in R&D investment, industrial R&D investment, are very, very low. We're talking about in the range of 1.12%, so extremely low. Now, we've been talking about the issue of education and underfunded higher education, which is growing massively for demographics reasons, and the fact that the governments cannot sustain that. You see where I'm going here. We got massive investment in R&D, which has got very low return on the private level. And we got big expenses at the government level to sustain a higher education system. Can we find the partnership at that higher level, rather than trying to find on the very small regions, the university providing the skills for the local industry for which, or the university provide a great idea which in 7 years will become a great product, which actually we know doesn't exist?
Pascal Lemasson.
Yeah, maybe
Difficult question.
one nuance regarding the return on investment on R&D. It's not necessarily low. What is important is a variance. There is no predictability between the investment on R&D and the return. So you can have very low return, even negative one, which is strange, and you can have very high return. What it means is that it's not, R&D is not enough. You need, in a sense, it's strange, but you need to manage. But you need to manage not in a decision way. We have all been speaking about deciding, and everybody knows that deciding is just excluding. So excluding is dangerous. But you have certain forms of management that can support this logic of, once again, exploration, emergent, all the things we have been discussing this morning. We have seen that in all clusters, we don't have really form of specialization. We have much more this capacity to support the emergence and support this capacity to explore interstices or these strange areas where things are unclear. And this is some form of R&D management. And this could bring some positive return.
Well, I think we must stop now. We're not late. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and I think we can go on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you for sharing.
All right, let's move on. Thank you very much. Indeed, it was a very dense discussion in a very short time. One thing that we heard from the previous panel is that the major innovation breakthrough, or to assess the importance of major innovation breakthrough, you have to to wait for a while, and it's only after a while that you realize how important they were. Well, the topic of the next session is why the newest technologies, the newest digital technologies, are important now. And to help us understand, I'd like to invite Walter Wiegel, the Vice President of Huawei European Research Institute, to come on stage and help us understand. Walter, am I right in saying that you are the perfect cluster product? You graduated from TU Munich, right, in electrical engineering. You're still a lecturer at the university, and you're also engaged with, you're also involved in a global company that has very intensive R&D operations in Munich. So, Walter, the floor is yours, and tell us why those digital technologies so important.
Yeah, Marilyn, thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from my side. Yeah, so actually, European Research Institute, I was asked already many times today. It's a little bit misleading, it's not one institute. I have one overview slide. It's our European Research Organization, actually. So, now I thought I have 15 minutes to give you an insight why our digital technology is important. I thought this is very difficult. I can easily speak about it 1.5 hours, but after this discussion it's even more difficult, because actually I like discussions not only about unknowns, but maybe going deeper into the unknown unknowns, research directions you are not aware that they exist. But now I have to bring you back, because we are a company, and I have to convince Madame Chen and other members of my board, why should our global company invest here in research in Europe and not in India, in the US, in Japan, where we also have overseas research centers. I wanted to go shortly back in history. So ICT, information and especially communication technology. What will be the future? And is it fair to say that we here in Europe, since the times of Nordic Mobile Telephone, of GSM, which was supposed to be our invention, then we opened it up as this was a global success with UMTS, nowadays LTE, and we are discussing now 5G. This is certainly a stronghold. And Rahim, our partner at University of Surrey, is soon on the stage as well. So the question is, and if you look shortly on the names, many companies here, they do not exist anymore. There were mergers, they gave up. So the question is not only about technology, the question is which technology is future-proof and makes a company surviving in the future. Now, what about the other part of ICT, IT? And here from the 80s, I tried to give you a little bit an idea what happened from the old mainframes to nowadays high-performance computers, about the density, some figures of flash memory, and then the operational power of the CPUs in high-performance computers. And again, if you look at the right side of this slide, I gave several companies. You may remember them. Many of them were European, but they also disappeared. And again, the question is, what do you need to do, technology-wise, to make a company surviving in IT? So I brought a few hypotheses to base on. Whether right or wrong, we may debate, but at least this is my underlying assumption for our strategy in ERI. There will be an information flood. This is because everybody is now collecting data, we are producing more data, and also especially the famous Internet of Things. If you have so many trillions of connected sensors, even if they produce only a few kilobits every minute or so, we end up in a huge number of data. And this, by the way, is not only outperforming, if you like, Moore's law, which, as you may remember, says every 2 years we will double the transistor density. I think it will bring us one point in time into a question, where do we store all this data? Especially as Moore's law will not help us to keep the pace. Second hypothesis, our digital society, which is seen by our politicians, we are a high-tech nation, Europe, that the digital society is a prerequisite for future survival in a global competition. This drives the rapid increase of users, and what I see in communication are two ways. One is exactly the IoT, and the other one is really high-performance broadband. We have shown meanwhile wireless up to 90 gigabit per second, so that you may have on your screen of your smartphone 3D displays or even holographic displays. So you have internet consumption, more data, more services, and finally driving this information superhighway. Third hypothesis, and I think this is very, very crucial for Europe. So telecom is one big pillar of our industry, together with the colleagues from Ericsson and Nokia. Another one, if you please shortly look just at the circles in the middle. Connected cars. We have the most successful car companies here in Europe. Smart manufacturing, Industry 4.0 is mentioned every day. Smart grid. I saw the slide that in Denmark there is a big hub for renewable energy, namely wind, but also solar. And if you have renewable energies, then you have chaos in the utility network, and you need a double layer communication network to control all this. E&M health, we talked about Stockholm. And last not least, here a photograph of a smart city. And is it fair to say that ICT will be the most important enabler of these vertical industries where Europe is very, very strong? So in other words, if we are not capable of using latest ICT technology in these vertical industries, we run a risk to lose out compared to other global competitors. Now a little bit into the future, what can this mean? One is certainly, especially coming from the Internet of Things, from autonomous driving, we will go beyond population with the technologies. So yes, pets may have their own tech, robots, autonomous robots, whether in an industry automation environment or at your home or in a retiree home to support elderly people, autonomous cars. Stage 5, you turn around, you don't look anymore through the vent screen, and you fully rely on the autonomous cars, even in the household. Connected smart home. Another one, I called it going beyond the human sense, because the sensors, I mentioned high definition holographic displays, virtual reality, augmented reality are big topics in research, will not only improve but maybe better than our eyes, ears and our human sensors. And I predict currently the wristbands, I don't want to make advertisement for our B3, but sports people are using them quite regularly. I think we will also go into this kind of environmental check where you have, for instance, in your smartphone, air or water quality sensor to check yourself what is your environment about. Going beyond the human body, health, as said, is one of the big topics. So what about your sleeping condition? Also again, wristbands are here at the forefront. You can monitor your sleeping patterns. There's a big race meanwhile in research about the sensors. Not only heartbeat, blood pressure, glucose level, oxygen level. So this, I predict, will be one of the big topics that in the future we may just use it. Nevertheless, we have a culture where this is your personal data, and we have to think about IT security if you choose not only to watch it yourself, but for instance to share it with your medical doctor. Beauty, skincare can be another field of this kind of research application. And then I have one, don't look into all the details, but I wanted to show it to you because some of our colleagues have done a great job. So we looked a little bit in different intelligence algorithms. What do you need to solve different kinds of artificial intelligence? And it is quite interesting. There are not so many algorithms and mathematical foundations finally used. This should be here, just giving an idea. Where do we think out of mathematical and algorithm research, like in our Paris center, what is necessary to improve and drive here from the artificial intelligence? And since the times of Deep Blue, we know that artificial intelligence, if you spend enough hardware and software, can be beyond our human intelligence. Now coming to our vision, where does this lead us? You have heard Huawei, we are having the vision of building a better connected world, and I took here only one example because we are investing, I think, 500 billion into the funding out of European taxpayers' money into our farming, compared to 70 million Horizon 2020, just to compare a little bit. Nevertheless, I think ICT is also one of the big enablers for farming, and here are some examples on the top right, and another one is certainly how to protect the environment. Here are some figures from flights in China or the US, where I think ICT can solve a lot of problems. Now, as promised, this is what we are doing. We are currently 1,600 researchers, 18 sites, currently in 8 countries. Very important is that the times are over where Einstein and Newton is sitting in a lab and creating the latest idea and finally a Nobel Prize and hopefully an innovation in the market. So we are very closely working together with you, our European partners. Actually, last year we have spent 75 million in cooperations, just out of research, not any other cooperation for the market. I don't go here on the right-hand side. This is a high level of our research strategy. Just along our product spectrum, we are doing research in cloud and big data, hardware and software. Wireless networks, I mentioned 5G, that's the hot topic. But by the way, many forget if you have solved a high-speed wireless link, what do you do in the backbone then? After the base station is arrived, what do you do with all the data? So optical networks are very, very important. Also optical backplanes in high-performance computing platforms. The blades to connect them is meanwhile the bottleneck. And terminals, so smartphones, Huawei watch, Huawei wristbands, and the real things. What we do is, that's mainly my task, about the research strategy. So I've taken one of the famous Gartner hype cycles. And I just wanted to let you know, when you compare the Gartner hype cycle 2016 and 2015, you find 16 new technologies. And the question is then for us, what makes an impact? What creates an innovation for us in a Huawei product? So the yellow lines are a little bit our focus: human-centric experiences, smart machines, cloud-based platforms, and new advances in wireless and wired connectivity. And on the right hand, different levels from the vision. So everything is intelligent, everything, even a little sensor, then everything is connected. And finally, you have what we call an intelligentization. I'm not sure whether this is really an English word, but I took the liberty as non-native speaker to maybe invent it. So shortly, key technology, only a few examples. 5G, and I don't discuss about the parameters. We are still doing research. We started just right now. We study items, the standardization in 3GPP. So what is important, for instance, for Internet of Things, the 1 millisecond latency, because if you have an industry robot and this does not react in real time, then you may have a crash in your factory. And I don't want to talk about an autonomous car. Very high density of connections, so we are discussing 1 million per square kilometer. It's also coming from Internet of Things, and then very modern slicing networks behind. I brought this slide, which is not totally research, but I wanted to share with you one point. I think we in Huawei are one of the very rare companies when you think about IoT. Many colleagues are just focusing on the connectivity, but if you want to apply it reasonable, let's think about a smart city, you need much more. You need the intelligent sensor, all right, intelligence already at the sensor, so you reduce the communication. You need the connectivity, the network, but then what do you do with all your data? You need a cloud, you need memories to store it, and finally you want to analyze it, so you need big data analytics, and as you may know, we are offering all these products, and hence we are doing research on it. Artificial intelligence, one of the hottest topics. I'm usually confronted with the view that the US are very much leading, but maybe you are aware that many US companies are using excellent European professors to fuel their research in artificial intelligence. So I think we don't need to hide. And actually we are here cooperating with many. And one of the topics we are having is in communication systems, cloud architecture, where the intelligence is not always in the center, but as said, to reduce also the communication on networks, on links between big data centers, that you have edge intelligence. And one of the hot topics is currently machine learning and deep learning. And then you need specialized hardware because you don't want to wait for some days. You want to wait maybe only a few minutes. Or if it is about fraud detection for credit cards, you want to use your credit card right now, so you have 1 or 2 seconds, and here you need this famous co-design between software and hardware, and indeed, as we have both, we can do so. Another example, as said, partners are very important for us. So you see graphene, yes, and we are working with the Nobel Prize award winner in Manchester. In the middle, this is something you may say quite stupid, it's coax connectors, but also you can innovate a lot there. It's coming from one of the partners, and the right one is from our latest mobile telephone. This is a cooperation with Leica in Germany. You may have seen it's a double lens smartphone, and by the way, it's not to give you stereo impression, no. One of the cameras is the real one, the other one is a black and white camera, and we use it to increase the depth and the sharpness, so it just gives you much better quality. Here another example, because I said already, in Europe car manufacturers are very much leading, so from automotive modules, if you have a German high-level car, there's a high probability that the module is coming from us, from the product colleagues. But then what is the way to the autonomous vehicle, currently based on 4G, LTE and LTE-V, and we are already doing field trials with 5G, how to make the communication better and more secure. And this leads me to my very last slide. Again, doing research and innovations with you all as our partners. And if you look please at the middle, I've put one very important topic in ICT, in many, not only communication, in many cases you need standardized approaches. It doesn't make a sense if Huawei or somebody else is coming up with a proprietary technology. So we are working together with all our competitors to finally have available technologies in the market and to create a win-win cooperation with our partners. Thank you very much.
All right. Hello, everyone. So that was a great springboard now for a conversation we're going to have about the future. I can invite my panel up, actually. So we're going to talk about new frontiers and how Europe is placed to take advantage of opportunities coming down the track. So I'm Aina, I'm a journalist with Science Business. Joining me is Rahim Tavazoli. He's director of the Institute of Communication Systems and the 5G Innovation Centre at the University of Surrey in the UK. His 5G research has already smashed records for connection speeds. Next to him, we have Philippe Tanguy. He's Vice President of R&D Programs and Partnerships in the Scientific Development Division in Total. I think most analysts would say Total is top of the league table when it comes to investing in future technologies and future clean technologies. Next to him, we have Hao Hu. He's a senior researcher with the Technical University of Denmark. And like Rahim, he's been involved in several record-breaking data transmission projects. And at the end, we have Xiaolin Fu, founding director of the Technology and Management Centre for Development at the University of Oxford. I believe she's Oxford's first tenured researcher from mainland Europe in the social sciences. Okay, so very simply, I'm going to begin by asking everyone, what technology are you most excited about for the future? So I'm going to begin with Rahim.
Thanks, Ina, and good afternoon. What technology I'm most excited about? Of course, I'm going to say 5G. But I need to define 5G from the way that we look at it. And I think the general perception of 5G, because it comes after 4G, then it's going to be simply 10 times or 20 times faster than 4G and full stop. That's not it. I think that 5G, 5G Innovation Centre was set up 2012 with the help of the UK government, of course. 1/3 of the funding initial was there. I have to acknowledge that. But the vision that we set up with our partners, original partners, which like Huawei, Vodafone, BT, Telefonica, and etc., was last 30 years, up to 4G, it was about communication between people, mobile communication. That was, okay. Are we going to do more of the same thing for the next 30 years? We thought this is not the case. The world has changed for the last 20, 30 years. And the next 20, 30 years will even change more. And today we're talking about digitization and society and economy and etc., etc., and the role of the ICT. The way that we look at 5G is we are going to develop a fabric of the connectivity. A fabric of connectivity that provides things which are important that needs to be connected wirelessly. That's what we are trying to do. Where we can evolve on this fabric, bring the richness in the functionalities, richness in the new technologies to be embedded much easier than previous generation system has ever done. So that includes what commonly referred to as broadband mobile. I think Walter mentioned about IoT. Initially, to have the capability of supporting at least 1 million devices every kilometer squared. And these devices could be things you do at home, your fridge, your toaster, etc., or things you do in factories, or things you do in a city, that people refer to as smart cities, things you do in hospitals, and etc., etc. So, estimate of 1 million times capacity connectivity. This is very important to enable all this connected economy and etc. And we believe that this connectivity needs to be done wirelessly. So we need huge capacity. If everything's going to be connected, everything which is important to be connected is wirelessly. So this is I'm excited about 5G. That depends on the definition that we, as well as our industrial partners, we have defined.
Is it too early to ask what kind of results you're seeing in your center?
Yeah, well, we look at the 5G, as I said, because it's a fabric of the connectivity. We look at it end to end. We look at the device, different range of devices, the wireless side, as well as on the network side, fixed wired part of the network side. And the results we have, because we are essentially limited with the radio spectrum, especially below 6 gigahertz. So we need to make the most of this radio spectrum. And what of the technology we have done is how can you utilize interference to your own benefit? Because so far interference has been a barrier and showstopper for capacity you can achieve. So we come up with a new technology. Detection technology is quite complicated, and that we utilize the interference. And excuse me for those who are not technical, in 100 megahertz bandwidth, you can do even 1 terabits per second. So the speed is not a problem. So other aspects of that I'm excited about, and we have achieved, we have certain achievement is on the network side, the wired side, there's a huge amount of data. There's a network data, user data, radio data, content data, and etc. It was Walter mentioned about data analytic and artificial intelligence. We wanted to see, can we really get some intelligence out of this data for the benefit of operating the data? So it's about data analytics. So BBC gave us 1 month of data in London area from people who download films, sport, and etc. from the iPlayer. Does anybody know what iPlayer is? I know the UK ones know. I asked this question in South Korea when I was last week. People said, no, we don't. It is a catch-up TV, sort of. You download the application, and if you miss live broadcast, whatever it is. So we had 1 month of data of people use different applications, films, and etc., and watch it. We used the first 25 days to fine-tune our mathematical model that we had, with the hope of, can we predict in the next 5 days, based on the first 25 days, the next 5 days, can we predict who is going to be watching what program and when? And to our surprise, we had accuracy of better than 95%. We knew which group of people, what age, was it children's program or is it grown-up program, and are going to be watching what program and when. So there is a huge amount of data and intelligence in there that we can exploit to run the future networks. This is another second, probably excited technology that we have developed.
Okay, thank you. We'll leave 5G for the moment then. I'll move on to Philippe. What's interesting in your field then for the future?
Okay, so thanks for the questions. In fact, I will start with the fact that we are all aware that we're in the middle of an energy transition. And we're in fact seeing our energy mix changes. At the same time, we are changing the way we deliver energy. And we all know the context of the Paris Agreement, COP21 last year. What does that mean? That means that in fact, we are seeing 2 trends. One is decarbonization of electricity production, and the second one is decarbonization of mobility. And this pathway towards a low carbon economy is going to be supported by a strong digital revolution. And in fact, we are going to use ICT to accompany, in fact, this change, this drastic change. Okay? So, if I want to decompose this a little bit more in details, you have 2 levels. One is a system level. Okay? The energy system is going to increase in flexibility, meaning that we need and we are going to manage in a much smarter way the offer. And in particular, these costly demand peaks that we see and that we need to shave. The second thing is something that we have not done in the past, is better match the offer and the demand. You know, in the energy industry, we are really in a push mode, pushing energy. But right now, things are changing because we are, in fact, living with customers which are much more demanding than before. So we need to be able to adjust the offer and the need of the customer. And for this, we need to gather data, a lot of data on the consumption, the individual consumption. And we are seeing a model by which we will have to track every individual customer. And I'll let you appreciate the amount of data that we will need to process and to interpret. But this is the easy part. The complex part is the disruptive social trend that we see in the way people interact with energy. In fact, as consumer, we tend to be much more demanding in terms of where does our energy come from, greener energy, okay? The second one is we may also have changing habits. We may have battery electrical vehicle that we need to plug when we come home at 7 p.m. every evening. And I'll let you appreciate that if 40 million people plug their cars at 7 p.m., we are going to see some sort of disruption on the grid. But more than that, we also see changing patterns on mobility, Uberization of mobility. We still have cars in the room, but maybe our kids do not have any more cars. And so those type of disruptive social trends, we also have to integrate this into our thinking. And for this, we need, of course, a lot of data. And we need to follow consumption. We need to follow the trends. We need to analyze, interpret, and in my opinion, artificial intelligence and machine learning are going to be key technologies that will enable to understand what's going on.
Thank you very much. I'll turn over to Hao now and ask about what kind of projects you're doing. I believe the kind of data projects you're looking at are even more powerful than 5G.
Yeah, that's true. What I'm looking into is even more powerful technology than 5G in the way of the high-speed interconnection and the data transfer, and also at the same time with the low energy. It's our goal of research. So actually today we heard a lot of interesting applications like Internet of Things and the cloud computing or is big data. And actually all of these interesting applications can be enabled only if there's a fast enough data transfer. And it's our project working on. And we are looking into not just 5G, I believe it's about 10 gigabit per second is a kind of goal. And we are looking into like 100 gigabit per second wirelessly, and also hundreds of terabit per second using the optical fiber. Maybe some audience not so familiar with this so fast data transfer, but actually it happens every day. It's a backbone of our society. So we have so much, it's a large amount of data every day, and this data needs to be transferred worldwide. And actually they are not just wirelessly, they're wirelessly connected to some mobile station, and they will be transferred using the underground fiber. Actually it's already the backbone of our society. So what we are working on is both wirelessly and optical fiber transmission. Wirelessly is, we can say, it's somehow beyond 5G, and we are using the frequency of 300 gigahertz to 500 gigahertz. 5G, I believe, is about tens of gigahertz in frequency. So using the so high frequency, we also call so-called about the terahertz communication. And with this so high frequency, we have more bandwidth. But of course, there's a coverage also shorter compared to 5G or 4G. There's a trade-off there. But for some special case, as maybe I point out, I mean, like for some big sports event or some music festival, maybe not just hundreds of people, maybe 10,000 people getting together. Maybe some audience also experience when so many people getting together, it's a problem of downloading or uploading of anything basically. since so many people getting together and everyone would like to share videos, for example, and where everyone would like to have some bandwidth. That's become a problem. And at this kind of situation, you might want some even advanced technology and even faster data transfer, both wirelessly and also, as I said, using the optical fiber. So it's what I'm or our group working on. So basically, it's data transfer with as high as possible speed, and we hold some kind of world record in this field of its kind, and also at the same time using as low as possible energy. It's our research project.
So your project, it's more powerful than 5G, but it's only appropriate for like a short range hotspot.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's treated over there.
Okay. Great. Okay. I'll move along to Sheldon now. What are you interested in, Sheldon, for the future?
I'm probably a brave social scientist coming to a meeting with many scientists and engineers. So I'm looking at this probably as an outsider from social science perspective to look at its impact on the economy and the society. So the technologies that excited me are artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, and also 3D printing. So they all together, combined together, is likely to have disruptive, profound impact on the economy and the society. Firstly, we are likely to see the improvement in efficiency and productivity. However, I would be cautious to say whether it's a significant, huge improvement in the efficiency. I may expand later because the labor is changing. Secondly, we'll see the replacement of labor. Artificial intelligence, robotics, is likely to replace labor with machines, with capital, with knowledge and skills. So we are likely to see unemployment in some of the sectors, and also unemployment of certain group in the labor force who do not have the skills to use the smart, intelligent manufacturing machines. So in one hand, we'll see the replacement of labor. Of course, in some cases, we'll see the improvement in working conditions in some of the sectors. When the working conditions is really poor, like in the steel factory, replace people with labor may improve the working condition. So there's two sides, but the unemployment and the reshuffle of the labor force will be there will be a big reshuffle. And we will see more and more program writers, more and more people at the back counter, and less people at the front. So the productivity, we are likely to see the improvement in productivity. I won't predict a huge improvement because more and more, employment labor to write the programs and there are more intelligent people, more trained people, and the salary will be higher for a company. That's second. The third, we are going to see also the reshuffle of the industry within the economy, with some industry emerging and some of the industry will withdraw, like Uber. Uber, even within the transportation industry, we see, more labor job created in one sector, but the traditional taxi company will lose their business. And also within the economy, some of the sector rise and some of the sector will shrink. And also we will see the reshore of some of the manufacturing industries back to the developed countries. So like back to Europe, back to Germany, back to the US, because they're using artificial intelligence, use robotics, and the cost of manufacturing will be lower. And with the rise of wages in some of the developing countries like China. So the whole world landscape will see a change in terms of industry global production. And we will see increasing inequality because income and the value added will more and more go into capital. going to the skilled labor and moved away from the unskilled labor. And therefore, the income inequality, without any policy, if the policy intervention is not introduced, we'll see more and more concentration of wealth and the income to those rich and move away from the poor and unskilled. And finally, with the 3D printing, it's also likely to change the whole global production network and the value chain, because nowadays the global value chain is organized in a segmented way, and with the 3D, the whole production will be distributed, and with a strong supply chain behind it. So the value chain organization structure will also be changed too. So we are likely to see disruptive change in the economy, in the way how production is organized, in the way income is distributed, and also labor force structure and the whole society. That's why.
Okay. Okay, so Shaolin sees some massive change coming. What's 5G going to bring us in the next 5 or 10 years? What's your predictions?
Well, in the next 5 years, 2020, the fabric of 5G will be in place. That's where it's going to start. So that fundamental basic blocks where the future connectivity, more intelligence, higher speed, for the sort of like terahertz frequency bands is going to be enabled. So that's 5 years from now. Once we have that fabric of the connectivity in place, there's going to be a huge number of different applications, different games. Because one of the requirements of the 5G is to minimize the delay, the latency. We're talking to Gareth from Imperial College over lunch, as well as there's a whole group of game industry around our university. We ask him, is that if you reduce the delay for you with 5G, what's going to be enabled? They came up with a fantastic raft of games that requires very low latency, low delays. And that will generate huge amount of virtual reality, augmented reality in the next 10 years' time. And more importantly, we will have holographic image of things, pictures that will pop out of our screen. For example, Ida and me, we can play chess in the air, for example. So that's the sort of things 5G will enable, or 5 years, or 10 years, or we can do remote gaming or whatever, immersive experience, VR, AR, and combination of those. I think the limitation is only our imagination. But that's what I could say.
Okay. Similar question to Philippe. I guess 5G is going to impact your industry as well a little bit.
Yeah, that's 5G, that's IoT. In fact, again, there are things that are quite well already, I would say, implemented in our fields, in our plants, related to sensors, to communication, to, I would say, analytics, as we mentioned in the past. There is one thing which is extremely important for us, and I'm sure you will understand why. It's cybersecurity. I've not heard much about this today, but in an industrial operation, you cannot compromise with this. And we don't want to be IoT, the Internet of Threats, or the insecurity of things. We want to be sure that everything is perfectly safe, and this is an important one. But there are other sides for the penetration of those ICT technologies in the way we operate every day. And I have, in fact, 3 examples that I would like to mention. One are drones. We are using more and more drones, civil drones, to do all sorts of things that, in fact, are difficult to man or or dangerous to man. For instance, high elevation surveillance, a flare, or developing rescue drones that you can send a drone on the sea to, in fact, help people and save their life. We have all sorts of applications there. The second one is robotics. So robotics was mentioned. Robotics is extremely important for us again, especially when you operate in very adverse environment. And I could give an example that working by 2,000 meters of water on the seafloor is indeed an adverse environment, and you don't see much people there. But a robot, an unmanned autonomous vehicle, is ideally, in fact, location for this. And the second and the third one that we have not heard so far is 3D printing and digital manufacturing. And you may wonder, what is the relation between an energy company and 3D printing? In fact, there are many. Because when you are maintenance, when you want to maintain a piece of equipment, and you are again living in or operating in a very remote area, you cannot bring parts easily. And if you are able to make a part locally with 3D printing, you are completely changing your life. So those three technologies, drones, robotics, and 3D printing, are going to be a real revolution in the way we operate in the future.
Thank you. I should look now to see if there's actually any comments or questions from the audience. No? Oh, we do.
Hi, Doris Alexander, Trinity College. I come from an IT background, so I'm excited by what you're saying, but we've only heard very vaguely mention of the social science and humanities today. We know that adults and indeed children, their attention span are going less and less because of information overload. We know children are having problems reading facial expressions on humans because they're connected all the time on social media. So whilst I can absolutely see what 5G and other technologies can bring, have you actually thought about the impact of face-to-face? You've got hyper-connectivity, but perhaps disconnectivity of face-to-face. And have you thought about that, and have you thought about those implications? Thank you.
Okay, anyone else want to say anything? Okay, we can take this one. Maybe Shaolin, do you want to attempt to take that one?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question that we face in today's digital world, and how this connectivity, brought by the digital, and also the connectivity we have interpersonal, changing the weight, and how this affects the new generation. I think this is a very important aspect that we need to look into, that's really to bring the scientists and social scientists together. Because human beings, they are, we have feelings, we have emotions, etc. And also, all these cannot be replaced by digital or artificial intelligence. So these are the things that we need to look at human needs, and where is the role to harness the human needs with the technical progress. And another issue I think we need to also address is ethics. Ethics, when the world is progressing, move very fast with robotics and artificial intelligence, one note of, in the future, robots are writing the programs and getting to know with the big data and the open access to data, getting to know everybody, all the personal information, and or predicting your behavior and even thoughts, and how we, the humankind, through how the society, through regulation, through policy, should guide and direct the direction of the development of technical progress. This is also a challenge that we face. I think nowadays the industry, the technology move faster than the regulatory understanding and also policy. this is a challenge to address.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're already, I think, coming close to the end of our allotted time. So I'll just finish with a question on Europe's place in all these technologies that were mentioned: robotics, AI, drones, 5G as well. How's Europe doing? Is it leading in any of these technologies, or is it plodding along? Yeah,
well,
should I go first?
I start by saying that 5G Innovation Center was the first of its kind in the world, and that's in Europe. Even though we are in UK, we're still in Europe. Okay. So we started doing the biggest open innovation center on 5G. We started in Europe. And because of my age, I've been through 2G, 3G, 4G. We've done all this technology started in Europe, even 4G. We put the foundation and the fundamentals of the technologies in 4G. Other part of the world had more money, they deployed it faster, like in US. 5G, I think we are ahead of US. We are at the same level with China and Japan and Korea, I would say. But the question is, whichever country and continent has more money will deploy it first. I think that is the difference. But in terms of technology, AIs, the innovative ideas about connected cars and autonomous cars and drones and etc. We have all these elements together with the vision and creativity in Europe. And so I'm not worried about being behind in technology in Europe. I think we are quite advanced compared to the rest of the world. But it's just the economy of who's going to take up the technology first makes a difference.
Are you concerned about a brain drain from your center after the Brexit vote?
Well, we are a university. We're supposed to train, and at the same time, most of our graduates, they get a job offer before they actually finish their thesis and etc. So hopefully we'll create the environment in Europe that they can stay in Europe. And some people go to the rest of the world, they go to US, and those who are more business-minded, actually they go to US, they go to California, Silicon Valley. And but the majority of my graduates in our center actually stay in UK and in Europe.
Okay, I'll move along to Philippe. Do you want to take any technology you mentioned?
I'm quite optimistic for Europe. Actually, whether in the university system, the innovation system, or in companies, I believe the trends and I would say the awareness is quite well developed and understood. You know, I'm vice chairman of Kekino Energy, a component of the EIT, and I'm just looking at our startup programs. We have over 60 startups right now in the pipeline. 2/3 of them are directly related to renewable energy or smart cities, smart buildings. And some of them are already capitalized with the help of venture capitalists, and some of them are the second roundtable. So, in fact, you know, when there is a business, usually there is a good answer by the community, and this is what we are seeing. So, I'm not too worried, and I suspect that Europe is going to make quite well in this area in the future.
Okay, how?
Yeah, I'm also kind of optimistic for this, for the Europe, since there's big companies in the Europe for the ICT like Nokia, and actually also like our sponsor Huawei. Actually, I think Huawei not just a Chinese company now, because it's like a global company since it has more than 10,000 employees in Europe. Actually, also have a lot of research activity in Europe. So that's a lot of investment in Europe, both from the big company, as I mentioned, like Huawei, like Nokia, like Ericsson, and also from the research funding like European Research Council. And all these research fundings can be the backbone of the research for the ICT. And I'm also optimistic. And from my field, the optical data transmission, and Europe also one of the top level at the moment. And I think, and I hope it can still keep the top level in the future.
When I went to Silicon Valley, I think people there are very ambitious and enthusiastic. And in China also, they are quickly catching up and watching the world's development. And in terms of the application of ICT, and China is really moving together with the world, However, when I think about AlphaGo, it is a British company, it's a European company. So actually there are a lot of creativity in Europe. And I think Europe needs to work together because there are a lot of creativity, but also the creativity need to work with industry to commercialize, to turn those technology and ideas into something that benefits the world and the society. So the whole Europe need to work together, university and the industry should work together. And in terms, another aspect I think we cannot ignore is the impact of this fast technical progress on the society and the economy and implications. And in the US, the technology companies, groups like Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, etc., they already set up an NGO to do research, examine the impact of this technical progress on the society, on ethics, on economy. And I think in Europe, Europe has done some work on this, but we also need to do more in this aspect, because only with this harmony and the technology can progress in a sustained way. Otherwise, there will be a backlash, politically, from the society, from the economy. So we need to bring this harmony and harness the benefits. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks to all my panel. We better end now and have some coffee. Thank you. I hope everyone got something nice from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Richard Hudson, the editor-in-chief of Science Business. And before we come back for coffee, I just wanted to say a word about what happens next. And that is that when we come back after the coffee, I'd like you to bring your ideas. We're going to turn this into this final session into kind of a bit of a policy workshop and asking you what you think the EU needs to do to encourage more digital innovation, okay? So get some coffee, bring your ideas back. If you're watching online, the hashtag is TechClustersEU, and just send in your ideas. Thank you.
Ok, merci. Alors.
Yeah, I already told him I don't care. I'm going to walk. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Robert Mantle. Hi.
Hello, Martti Mäntylä.
Nice to meet you.
Please take your seats. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Rocking chair.
Welcome back. Again, I'm Richard Hudson. I'm the editor-in-chief of Science Business. And what we're about to do now is to have a little policy discussion together. And that is, we've gone through today kind of a cook's tour of many aspects of European regional innovation, innovation policy, scientific policy, several other things. And in conclusion, what I'd like to do is have a discussion with you and our esteemed panel on specifically what is to be done in the EU if we are to encourage more digital innovation. So for this discussion, so I'm going to come to you in just a moment, so be ready. To get this moving, we have with us Carlos Sorinho.
Thank you.
He's a member of the European Parliament from Portugal, a former Portuguese Secretary of State, and also originally your first job in government, I think it was with the National Technology Council as well.
Not the first, but one of the most important.
Okay, too many jobs to count. And you're also a professor as well. And a member of the ITRE committee in the European Parliament, which deals with industry, transport, research, and education. I think I have it right, yes. Beside him is Robin Mansell. She is a professor of new media and the internet in the Department of Media and Communications in the London School of Economics, has been involved in many government advisory bodies in the UK and also in the European Union on these topics, and so is very familiar with a lot of the issues we're talking about here. Beside her is Martti Mäntylä. He's a professor of information technology at Aalto University in Helsinki. Aalto University is well known as one of the entrepreneurial universities in Europe, which is not to say LSE isn't, I hasten to add, but that is its reputation. And Martti, I think you were also running a co-location center for EIT Digital.
Well, I was the strategy officer of the outfit.
Yeah, so you have
for a while.
That involvement also with the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. And beside him is Robert Madeleine. Robert is the, many former positions. How many years in all at the Commission? 30, was it?
25.
25, okay. Former Director General for Connect, Information Society, or as many, it's had several names over the time. Your last position, which you just left, was in the new policy advisory body attached to President Juncker. And you just finished a report on innovation policy and recommendations there too. So now that you have officially left the Commission, you can tell us what you really think. So with that, let me just begin. So I just wondered if we could get a few ideas to start the discussion going. If you are asked the question, what is the most important thing, let's not do, that the EU could do to encourage digital innovation, can you say it in 10 words or less? Yes? In 1 word, education.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe 2 words. Hold on.
Skills.
Skills and access.
Okay, more than one word. To make sure that in schools, young people, even the age of 8, 9, 10, are introduced to the idea of computer coding. Maybe just the ideas of it, but to get them thinking about computer coding at a very young age. I think that will set them up to acquire skills.
So specifically coding, it's
Yes.
very, very young.
Yep.
Okay, all right, all right. Idea one. By the way, we are taking notes on this. We will be publishing a report on it. If this will be used. Well, that's one idea. Another idea. Somebody else. Yes. Please identify yourself.
Thank you.
You said earlier you were from Imperial College London. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Vincenzo Gervasi, University of Pisa, resist the urge to regulate stuff before the time has come. So leave space in the regulatory framework for experimentation.
Resist the urge to regulate before its time has come. But okay, well, we will come back to that issue. So that's a second point. A third. Oh, you have the power to change the European Union. Another one? Okay. Let me turn to the panel. Our panelists, I'm afraid that we're cheating. They knew the question in advance. Let's begin first with you, Carlos.
Thank you.
The most important thing that could be done.
I think it's very important to understand, as the people told, that with this digital revolution, we need a new digital language, a new universal language, and to prepare people to understand and to work, to create value with this new digital language is really very important. But this is only a...
That's kind of what related to what he was saying.
It's just a reaction of the suggestions of the audience. My two main ideas, one is very easy, but we need to achieve the playing level field with our main competitors. Now, our digital single market is not yet so competitive than the digital single market in America, in the United States or in China. And first, you need to be at the same level. And before that, you need to make the difference. And what could make the difference, in my opinion, taking into account that you are in European Union, taking in account you have now a lack of trust of citizens in this European project, taking into account we have a lot of difficulties with austerity, with money, and with budgetary constraints. What we really need is to have something like a citizenship drive development of this digital market.
Citizenship drive development.
Yes. So we need to be focused not in the return of the investment, but in the solutions, because good solutions at its time give also return to the in investment. But we need to look which are the main problems in Europe now: refugees, migrants, unemployment of some people, access to public service, and so on, and to have more health with less money, and so to drive our developments with this perspective, to give solutions to people, and to explain to Europeans that, okay, we feel, it's not really true, but we feel, it's a perception, and perceptions in the world we live are essential. We feel that we are losing the battle, the global battle, but you have a new beginning, and the new beginning is this digital revolution, and in the new beginning we can win with them.
Okay, and so to get citizens to be, you also mean education as well,
yes,
in order to actually get them involved in the process and to realize
but more
that
than
digital
more than
technologies
involved
can
in the
improve
process,
things.
they need to be the clients of the process, the beneficiaries of the process.
Okay, all right. Robin, number one thing to do.
It's a very challenging question. I think my response is that
if there is a single thing that Europe could benefit from in terms of managing the innovation process, it is to recognize that the whole system of innovation is complex. It's a system. Because it's a system, we're involved in transitions from one generation of technology to the other, from one business model to another, from different political situations, and therefore thinking about how to organize joined up thinking about how to address very big economic, social, and technological challenges is probably the biggest thing that I would identify. We have lots of good work going on in vertical areas quite often, whether it's 5G or it's talking about addressing security issues, cyber criminality, those kinds of things, but getting more joined up thinking going on, not just amongst the people who reside in Brussels, but in national capitals, in schools, in institutions of higher education, to mobilize that kind of effort so that the full creativity of the people that we do have who think about these issues can be brought together and exchanged.
Okay, but so concretely, I'm having, what could, for instance, the European Commission do about that to achieve it? Or, well, sorry, you're living in London, I should say, what should the UK government do about it?
In the UK, we have research councils, we have government ministries, all of whom are addressing these kinds of questions, whether it's green technology, whether it's cyber criminality, whether it's the new Digital Economy Act. Quite often, the way in which questions are posed are very specific to a technological problem. Thinking about those problems and moving from one generation of technology to another, where does the capital come from, etc., is often something that can be addressed much better by coalitions of people coming from the private sector, the public sector, and the third sector. And quite often, certainly in the venues which I attend, you'll have one sector is missing. Maybe it's big business which is missing, or maybe it's civil society is missing. Bringing the voices together so that they can actually turn their minds to these really wicked problems to make progress, and then to suggest what can be done is a way forward.
So more networking of the different groups, you're saying?
Certainly more networking, but not networking with no aim, if you know what I mean. There are big, wicked problems out there, like how do we move from one generation of 4G to 5G? Who will the investors be in the European context? Does it matter whether it is mainly overseas companies?
This is interesting. So three of the comments here from you and from you are so far relating to this idea of part of the problem is people just don't get it or just aren't doing enough about it. Mm-hmm. And none of you has yet said the government should do this specifically. I want umpty billion euros to do X.
Would you like me to respond to that?
Yeah.
I think that would be an enormous mistake. Like Marcus was saying earlier, the pendulum has swung, I think, towards or away from basic science. We do need strategic science. We need applied research. We need training and education. But we also need the pure science to be working together. So if government comes along and says, we will pour money into a very particular area, like ICTs in society, and we won't fund environmental research, for example, governments don't have a crystal ball which they can foresee the future. The only way in which we can manage these very difficult transitions is to work together incrementally in partnership between the different actors. And that's been demonstrated historically.
Okay, all right. Marty, I'm going to give you a blank check, okay?
Okay.
What would you spend it on? What's the most important thing that the EU could do to encourage digital innovation?
Right. Well, I was trying to think of this from the policy-making angle, because there are many other answers. But let's start with that. And something that actually worries me quite a bit is data. Mm-hmm. If data indeed is the oil of digital transformation, then we are in a bit complicated situation where nobody really knows who owns it and who can do what kind of processes on it and how it can be transported. And so we have all these big controversies now between, say, companies that think that they own the data they generate. They want to keep 100% control of it. In no way they are willing to expose it to others. And on the other hand, the quite obvious opportunities that would come about if some of that data could be shared and utilized across company borders to do something new. So, and this is made even more complicated by perhaps it is a bit kind of a, political, almost politicized discourse of kind of open data fundamentalism meeting something else, so that it tends to be sort of very biased discussion, which doesn't make it very easy. The opposing bodies don't seem to be able to discuss it very well. And I think we ought to try to find some kind of intermediate position. Is it possible to give some kind of partial rights to data without exposing, say, company secrets, but still enabling some useful added value to be created? Can we find mechanisms how to do that?
And you don't think any of the proposals or plans so far do that?
Oh, I think there are many of them we should study. And I don't think that it's not a simple problem at all, I'm afraid, and that there's no one-size-fits-all. So I think that would need good comprehensive studies and then very wise policy making, leaving a lot of scope for individual industries, say, to come forth with their own. Of course, there are areas where there is a clear societal interest, say, in health and well-being or transportation or energy, where clearly there's a societal benefit that would come from forcing a little bit more openness and sharing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm
wait,
just wondering how efficiently that kind of debate is now happening, and if the positions of the bodies are
At the moment, you think
yes.
the problem is that the data, there's not enough freedom to use the data, or too much? I'm not sure which way you're coming from.
Well, now we see not enough sharing.
Not enough sharing.
So
okay.
There should be more of that. There are opportunities being missed because
of
data
security,
is not shared.
Because of security or privacy or ownership?
The security, privacy, company secrets, whatever they are. And they are quite legitimate problems that need to be treated. But total 100% closing off is not the solution. I think that should be adopted. We need more flexibility in the future. So that is a policy topic in my mind.
Okay, but wait, let me stop you there, and we'll come back to the thing.
Sure.
But before, and Robert, maybe you want to dive in on this point before we come to your official wish list. But with the question that he raises about data ownership, data, etc. What is the what do you think of the current state of affairs, or what could be done about it? Yes.
On this point?
Yes.
So firstly, I absolutely agree. It seems to me that in the world of the 21st century, there's the ethics of knowledge need to be rethought. Is it ethical that I say to the rest of the world, you can't have my genome, if by putting one hopefully healthy genome alongside a lot of others, the University of X can maybe save lives? Is that ethical?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no. And then the question is, well, since he's a nice guy, why does he not want to share his genome? And the answer is fear. So if the answer to the data problem is fear on the part of individuals, how do we take the fear away? And the answer will be, if because your genome leaks, you can't get health insurance anymore, the state will pay. It's the only possible answer, or a foundation will pay. And I think we have to go through these more complicated discussions in order to unpick the current short-term opposition that ethical behavior is facing in the 21st century. That's only one example.
Do you think that Europe is out of sync with the rest of the world in dealing with this problem?
I actually think, especially if we stay with the health space, that the fact that we have quite a strong presence of the state and of public institutions in the management of health, including health research, is an asset. Because I think we have the ability to create a trustable framework perhaps more easily than others. Now, will we do it? That's a different question. That's about statesmanship and visionary leadership to take the benefit of our institutions. But I actually think, no, we may be out of step, I don't know, but I actually think that in going forward, we have a potential asset.
Okay. Carlos, you have, in the Parliament, you of course have been dealing with and following these issues about that he's referring to of the various legislation. What is your analysis at the moment? Are you happy with the current state of the rules?
Now, the things are developing quickly, and I think that we need to move to a more open approach about that. I feel that is not possible, okay?
Not possible.
No, not possible. No. Data is really the access, the oil of the new society.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a lack of data, you have a big problem. But when people, for instance, elect me to come to the Parliament, they ask two things, safety and privacy. And we need to show, and it is possible to show that, for instance, in health and in other systems, more data is more safe. For instance, in the all the question of protection against terrorism and things like that, big data, more data is more safe because it's a different path. It's a path that is not individualized path. You can help individuals without to know about individuals. This is really very critical, but it's very difficult to explain to normal people. But I think it's very, very, very important for us to explain that if we need also an union of data, an union of data, and more data, it's better to be more competitive in the industrial point of view. It's better also to give best services and best answers to the citizens.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, Marty. Yeah.
Just a comment that I basically agree that more open data is what we need, but it's also we have to be careful with the language because that may be a red flag to some participant of the discourse. Not my data, so forget it. So more access to data, whatever is the expression. Because I'm not a proponent of opening all the data of the world and make it freely accessible. That's not reasonable at all. What I'd like to see is an effective market of data, that we know the value of the data, that we can calculate somehow, capital bound in data assets. We can measure the risks involved,
yes.
And when we can measure the risks, then we can also protect ourselves against the risk. We can take an insurance against that, or whatever it is. So we need to make this a regular, understandable, and predictable business, and then the market forces will do the rest for you.
But with data, you have a win-lose game. Without data, you have a lose-lose game, in my opinion.
But go ahead, Robert.
I just wanted to say I was a bit more optimistic. I think of data as the new blood and not the new oil. In other words, there is an ethical content.
Yes.
We're taking bids for new metaphors. Go on.
and I actually think that if the initial reaction is not my data, the right response is tell me why. What would enable you to trust the system better? And there are examples out there. The technology will fix it. I think that the use of blockchain type technology in the Estonian system, so I put my health data in the system, anybody who sees it, I will know forever what they've done with it. And as a result, you can prosecute officials who misuse access rights to the data.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in the Hungarian system, the state has all my data, it's a national system, but now they give me a nice app where I get something really personalized that helps me, that drives my behavior, so that's good for public health in Hungary, and also makes me feel ownership of this big pot of data with some of my data in it. And these sorts of little tweaks which technology make possible enable the individual to feel ownership of what's going on.
I'd just like to add to that, say, the experience from Creative Commons licenses that were introduced. Creative Commons, yes. They were introduced about 10 years ago, give or take a few, and indeed they resulted a great deal of more mobility of data. So that is a system for granting, partial rights. I own a piece of content, but I give you the right to use it under certain license.
Yep.
And it works well enough, so that indeed much more media is being reutilized or cross-utilized. And can we think of something, not similar, but analogous in some fashion for other types of data in order to enable much more mobility? Anyway, that's a topic that I would dearly like to see resolved in Europe, and I agree that we could have an edge as Europeans in that regard.
Robin.
There are technical solutions. There are industry solutions, different business models. We could create a market for data, but the singular dimension that needs to be addressed is what you might call literacy across the piece. So people, as they grow up, need to become aware of all of the possibilities for what is known about them, what they choose to keep private, what they choose to make public. And that's not something you can change overnight by changing legislation. It comes down to the implementation, and the implementation is multi-layered. So it does begin with children who may be learning to code, but they must be learning to do many other things as well, to discriminate between different situations in public spaces and in the home, where certain things work and are safe, and certain other things are not. And it's on that basis of a broadly based understanding across society that we can build institutions and markets.
Okay,
Data.
but these are deeply personal matters, what you're talking about in the family, your attitudes towards this thing. What right or what role has the EU to do anything in this? Doesn't this end up being ultimately something that should be decided locally, regionally, nationally, anywhere but except across an entire continent all at once with 28 different members?
May I respond?
Yeah.
I think that the key is variety, that yes, at one level, at the EU member state level, there can be a consensus about the way in which intellectual property and ownership of data works. But these things are multi-layered, and variety happens at local level, regional levels. They're partly cultural, they're economic, and they're not just political, and we're not going to see the end of the state. The state is not going to pull out altogether from these issues. It will always have a voice, and that voice may resonate in a strong way or a weak way with local situations. So I think posing the question is, should the EU not have anything to say about this particular issue, is not recognizing the fact that there are all of these different interests are coming together, and there's no straightforward one-way street towards the big data market of the future. We're probably going to get there, but how we get there and how you enroll citizens and companies, large and small, is what the big question mark is. And I come back to my point that this takes a dialogue, and it takes education at all levels.
Okay, all right. So we got into kind of an extended riff here on the issue of how do you manage, what could be done to deal with the ownership of data. If we can solve that problem, then that is a potential European asset, an advantage in stimulating more digital innovation. We get that.
The critical issue here.
But we stopped before we got to your number one thing that should be done.
So the piece that I think most important is in a way 21st century citizenry. I think that 500 million people need to feel they somehow own their future. And so the way I would do it is to do what the Mayor of Paris has begun to do. I would say, so what Mrs. Hidalgo has done is to say, 5% of my budget for the next 5 years, here's an online survey, tell me how you want to change, at the margin, public expenditure in your city. And that's a very small example, but I think it's very interesting. And I think it will not only give it new evidence to municipal decision makers, it will build social capital in that town in a way that it hasn't been built recently. So my equivalent for Horizon 2020 would be to say, here's 10%, what do people want it spent on? We almost got there. We almost got there in FP7 when in 2011, we had 6 flagship projects. And they were all pretty good. We gave them funding to go to the next stage. And we asked ourselves, is the decision on which two get the billion each going to be made purely on excellence over the intervening 18 months? Or will there be a sort of a co-creation of priorities? In the end, collectively, the Commission decided to do it on its own, so there was no citizen budgeting. And we ended up with one life science, one material science, and actually both projects are rather sexy. But I think there's room to say to citizens, innovation is the future, but you own the future, it's your future. What do you want to spend your money on?
So let people vote on 10% of the next, FP9, the next framework project.
I don't see why not, personally.
But this would be going beyond digital innovation. I mean, undoubtedly they'd come back.
Well, I'd be happy to do it. I mean, if they
yeah, what if they
for
say
my successors, I'm happy to do it for digital as a prototype. What would that do? I think what it would do is to lead people to do what happened the day after they voted in the country I know best about the EU, which is to Google and find out what it is.
Hopefully before the vote.
Well, yeah, that would be the idea.
Yeah. Has this ever been discussed inside the Commission?
Yeah, as I said.
You mentioned it in the flagship program.
In 2011, we discussed it for fairly...
I don't remember. Did you do a survey of any kind?
Oh.
Oh. Somebody might not have liked the answer.
So we decided not to. We decided that with the too difficult, not enough time. But it's to show that the question, how do you get citizens interested in spending some of their money on research and innovation, that's a real issue.
Yeah.
And the problem has not become less intense since 2011. Why is there downward pressure on innovation budgets? Because people don't think it matters.
What do you think of that? I mean, do you agree? Let's vote on 10% of the next framework pot.
Any advance on 10%?
Yeah. Anyone? Yes.
In favor?
Go ahead. Now take the microphone.
Well, you are asking our opinion. I say
yes.
I would be in a favor to proceed that way. Yes.
Yeah. And you are?
I'm Fabien Storder, working at DEC for DigiConnect.
Okay. Oh, inside the Commission they want democracy. Okay. All right, yes.
Yeah, it's a great idea. 10% sounds great. But I've got one question. I have an 8-year-old son.
You believe in?
An 8-year-old son.
Oh, okay.
And if I ask him, about the man on the moon, I'll ask him who put the man on the moon. Will he say America? No. Will he say NASA? No. He'll say Neil Armstrong put the man on the moon because he drove the spaceship. So I want to know, in terms of digital innovation, everything's gone dead.
Yeah, that's working. Just hold it close.
Okay, can you hear me now? No?
Yes.
Yes, I hear you.
So I want to know who are Europe's digital ambassadors? So who will go out there and sell the benefits of digital innovation to the European citizen?
That's an interesting question, actually, because one of the questions we were thinking about beforehand was that if there were a European Larry Page or a European Jack Ma, what would this person be like? What would their background be? What field? Microphone? Yeah, okay.
So I'm saying, is it a person, is it an entity, is it a company? I mean, if you look at innovation, the iPhone was invented by Steve Jobs, not Apple. People think he's brilliant.
Yeah.
So
reaction to that?
It can be a company, can be an individual, can be an entity, can be the European Union. But who are the ambassadors? Who will actually motivate the European citizen to embrace this activity and really believe it?
Yeah, Robin?
I would say it is people, human beings, who have the capacity to bring the vision of a connected future together with the practice. And it seems to me that so often what we see is a great gap between everyday practice and the vision of what the new technology can accomplish. And we see it in every sector of the economy because IT gets everywhere. So it is the person who has that capacity to really be able to see in a far-reaching way, but also see a pathway towards it. And there's never one pathway. There's often many pathways.
I think that with with the new technological generation, with 5G networks and with Internet of Things, all people, not only people, but all of us will be linked with the others. And it's critical to give people the power to choose which links they want to prefer. This is the base of the concept of Industry 4.0, to create new chain values. This is the base of the new concept of Society 5.0. But we need also something like Politics 5.0. It's there are some values. The political parties are very important in democracy. They present their big vision, their big picture, their big values. But before the concrete decisions, I agree, 10%, 20%, 30%, things are changing very, very quickly. It's not possible to have a program for 4 years. It's completely, it's an exercise of fiction to propose a program for 4 years for the Commission or for a government in a country.
So we shouldn't have any more 7-year framework programs?
No, the framework, we need to have a framework of values, a framework of beliefs, but in each moment we need to empower people to decide which links they prefer. And it's for that, when I think about the, which is the name, Larry Page or Jack Ma in Europe, I think someone that need to be very committed with the multiculturalism, diversity, and something that is difficult to define, but I'm trying to do that. The European digital identity. We need to develop something like that. Our DNA in digital world, the kind of values that we share together. It's very important. Someone that is all the same capabilities of leadership than the others, the Chinese one and the American one, but with this difference about our shared values that will need to be embedded.
So
in
if
network.
it were a European, I'll come to you just a moment, Robert, just to finish
No,
this.
I finished,
If
yes,
it were
yes.
if it were a European ambassador, might it be something, rather than starting a search engine or starting an internet service provider, gateway, then it's perhaps something more to do with social innovation or cohesion, or is that a uniquely European contribution?
You are rebuilding the world, so is shaping the world is the big opportunity to be included in that.
Marty.
One thing that now comes to my mind, one of my associates wrote a doctoral thesis once about what he called performative interaction. And the idea is that we don't only use these things, we also perform to audiences with these things. And so in some sense, an ideal conveyor of European values would be an artist that takes all this new technology and turns it to a new art form that becomes immensely popular. He becomes the new Michael Jackson or whatever, he or she, combines different things, uses the digital whatsoever we managed to build to turn that to a new art form, a new opera for 21st century, whatever you can imagine. That everybody picks up, the whole world's youth immensely falls in love with that new type of art form. Okay, difficult to imagine, but that would be ideally, in some sense, encompassing the European values. It would be a wonderful, wonderful thing to happen. Perhaps somebody picks it up.
Robert?
So we do have a network of digital champions in Europe, and in the country you know best, it would be David Putnam. But these sorts of people, are they the brands that will sell the desire to become a better 21st century citizen? I'm not sure. It seems to me that, to go back to the comment of the first speaker, we kind of need to go back into primary schools and find local heroes. And I mean, there's a Slovenian NGO which is busy doing that. But the reason is that actually the global we can see, but the local changes also what we believe in. And so I think if I don't have any problem with the heroes of the digital century being Chinese or American. I don't say, oh, well, then we must have one that we'll call European. But at the other extreme, I actually think that we need to get people into the classroom so that primary schools classes understand that actually digital is everywhere. It's next door. The local nurse uses digital, the local carpenter uses digital. And that will get to the point that Robin's talking about, I think, which is it is everywhere, it is the new normal. And I think that we need rockets and we need the big stuff, but we also need the small stuff.
Okay. There was a question or comment that I saw there. Yes? No? Okay. Back there.
You were talking about art, but of course a good game. You know, people and especially younger people like to play. So at the present time already, there's so much connection through games. And remember what happened last summer with Pokemon Go, and you can add up on a game. You know, you start with a game. And, well, it has branches, and you can innovate in finding new little routes out of this game, you know, which could have plenty, like a tree.
Virtualization.
So maybe math education should go that way, should be done that way? Yes, comment here.
I'd like to challenge the panel a little bit.
But please remind us, those of you who weren't here in the morning, who you are.
Jaak Aaviksoo, I'm the Tallinn Technical University, BC. I'd like to challenge the panel a little bit. We traditionally believe in 4 major freedoms in Europe. And we do have problems nowadays, especially with services. I do believe we have even more problems with e-services than regular services. One idea that I think might remove some of the barriers might be an introduction of a digital identity Europe-wide, with a charter of e-citizen rights. For instance, universal access to all e-services provided wherever in the European Union. We know that the barriers are extremely high. In e-commerce, for instance, forget about public services that are very different, fundamentally fragmented, and so on and so forth. So that might be an idea. I know it's not an easy task, and there's several political obstacles to that. But if we are brave enough, would you sign to that kind of a charter of digital citizen rights and a digital identity for every European citizen?
And the two of them together, a charter of rights and an identity, yeah.
I think it's a very, very interesting idea. From 2007, Europe decides to go more intergovernmental. But also in the Lisbon Treaty, the treaty that has the name of the capital of my country, in the Lisbon Treaty also is reinforced the possibility to create, to duplicate the world, the reinforced cooperations. And I think we need to develop a reinforced cooperation, as are the Euro or the Schengen process, to create this kind of digital identity. It's 3 or 4 or 5 things that if you want to follow with this model, I prefer another, but I need to accept the choice of the governments. With this model of intergovernmentalism, we need to have 4 or 5 in energy, in digital, in safety, security, in monetary policy, that we need to work together with the top-down approach.
Could I, before you answer, could I ask you a question though? What would be in this digital charter of rights? Things like what? Ownership, or privacy? Or
well, let us. I mean, I don't know, frankly speaking. I haven't drafted one yet, but I'm thinking about
your homework.
You know,
okay.
if we live in a virtual space, I think we have to have some guidance, some value-based guidance, how to behave, what are our rights, what is right, what is wrong in this virtual space. What we can agree upon, I don't know. Frankly speaking, already a digital identity or a number attached to every citizen is already a problematic issue, I think. In some countries, I know it's toxic. In some, for instance, in Estonia, we don't care. I think it's a great thing. We can live with that. For instance, data, a fundamental question. My data, my genome. Who owns that data? Is it a public good or a private good? We have to agree upon. I know different countries go in fundamentally different directions. In Estonia, we believe that all the data is owned by people themselves. My medical data, my records in state registers, I own them. I can close them. I can see, as was pointed out, I can see who has accessed these data. Mm-hmm. And if it's without due legal procedure, I can sue them in court. But there is another approach that this is a public good, also possible. But we haven't even discussed on a European level, and we are heading in different directions.
Okay, all right.
So I think there must be some commonly agreed rules in this European virtual space.
Okay, Robin.
I'm aware globally or internationally of various bills of rights for the internet age that are being discussed, and they often have an ethical dimension, but they also are values-based. And I'm also aware that discussions are going on in Europe. Just a little short story. I was one of the researchers at the LSE some years ago who was arguing against the introduction of a digital identity card. Why? The basic fundamental reason that we argued against it was not because, in principle, we thought it would be a bad idea, but because when the company interests came together with the public sector interests, they simply could not agree how they would protect individuals' data as they wanted to sell it on. And they couldn't agree not to do that without the right of the citizen to agree to it. And since they couldn't agree, it was going to be a public sector only identity card issue, and that's why we basically objected to it. So my point is, again, this gap between the fairly high level ideals, which in Europe would probably have a slightly different mix of values than they might have in the United States attached to them. But when it comes to practice, you run into the interests of the different groupings. People actually have to implement the technology. And that's where we stumble. In a small country, perhaps there are less people who have to negotiate. I don't know. I stand to be corrected. But when you put it on a global scale, or indeed on a European scale, it's there where the joined up discussion becomes so essential, because otherwise you take 2 steps back before you take 1 step forward.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just comment on that, I think those are, they may be wise words in the sense that if you look at what New Zealand is doing, they haven't said the big data problem will be fixed with a new piece of legislation. They've said the big data problem will be addressed in a digital futures forum, convened in a multi-stakeholder trustable way, and the government and other stakeholders must respond to what comes out of it. And I think, therefore, my answer to the question would be, we need a conversation on that. Mm-hmm. I'm slightly unsure whether we need to define a single number. I actually think that probably big data will fix the single number, single name problem by the time we've agreed how to organize the single number. So I'm a bit skeptical whether learning coding when you're 7 is the answer, because maybe coding won't be the vehicle. It will be like learning Gregorian chant in the 19th century. So I'm a bit cautious about being prescriptive, but I very much believe that these are the questions, rather like the 10% of research, we need to be challenging people not like us to think about. Because I actually think that people like us have better answers to these questions than people not like us have better answers to these questions than people like us. And the reason that we have a lack of trust and a lack of commitment at the moment is that people like us international liberal elites, as my Prime Minister would put it, are somehow forfeiting the trust of everybody else. So it couldn't do any harm to ask to launch a conversation, but I'm not sure what the point of arrival would be. But merely asking the question would be radical.
Okay, Marty, as another member of the international liberal elite, what you were going to add something, I think, to this discussion?
Well, I come back to what you said, that it's only not on, I would be hesitant to give people rights without also discussing the responsibilities part of it, the ethical side of it, and what does it mean to be a digital citizen in a digital society, and where is the balance? And that's a discussion we simply need to have before really regulating or moving towards that. So something like what you mentioned happens now in New Zealand, or starts to happen.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable to me. It's not a short road, but that's what we need to do.
This discussion it surprises me that we have spent, I would say, 90% of the time talking about what you generally call kind of soft issues of culture, of education, of democracy, and this kind of thing. And nobody's, except your suggestion to have 10%. Even of that money pot decided, that's also kind of a social, democratic suggestion. But none of you are saying, just give us more money. No. If you want to have more digital innovation, spend more money on it. Why not?
I guess we have internalized the austerity.
Well, yeah, I mean, your country...
let's find clever ways of doing things.
Martin and Carlos, your countries have gone through...
money. Now it's data. The data is digital money. But we ask for data, and data is digital money.
Bitcoins, huh? But no, for your two countries, Finland and Portugal,
yes.
Your country has gone through, 9 years? 8 years of austerity.
Yes.
Your country has gone through, 3 years now?
3-4 years.
Yeah, okay. The impact on digital innovation is what in your countries? Is it possible to have digital innovation without lots of money around?
Absolutely, but we have to be more clever about it. So the simple policy of spreading money everywhere and hoping that some of it will be find good use is of course no longer the case. No, it's a tricky game, but much of what we are talking about is not necessarily so investment intensive after all. It's about clever ways of recombining what we already have, and that doesn't take huge investments always.
Okay.
In Portugal, first, the impact of the Troika program is global in the countries. People decrease your ambition and your perception about the future, and this is bad. But quickly, and there are characteristic of Portuguese people is to be very adaptive. I think quickly, this kind of crisis changed to an opportunity. And now, for instance, Portugal is able to attract and motivate a lot of qualified people to invest in startups. The Web Summit is now, from this November for the next 3 years, will have place in Lisbon. And a lot of players are now installing your headquarters. For instance, Vodafone last week installed a 3 big center in Lisbon. So I think the first impact is a shock, but the second is adaptation. And the main problem is to have skilled people and to convince skilled people to stay in Portugal and not to go outside, because there are, in this market, the market is the world.
Okay, all right. Just a last few comments, and then we will have a drink. Yes, one there. No, behind, yes. And then there.
Very quick question.
You are?
Gabi Lombardo, European Alliance of Social Science and Humanities. Is there, looking at the title, is there an assumption, talking about accelerated digital innovation in Europe, is there an assumption that we're not going fast enough? And do we have any benchmarking? Because I don't quite see that. And people actually say we're going too fast. So I don't know, I'm not genuinely asking.
Okay, yeah.
So I think the short answer to that, and it comes back to Richard's point about money, one of the most unpopular things I said in my report is we don't need more money for research in order to do better on innovation. Where we do need money is on infrastructure. For example, the rollout of innovation available today, 4G across Europe, is too slow. As a result, we're not developing demand for what will be possible with 5G. So that's an example where, yes, we need to accelerate. But on the social side, and Edelman did some work on this in 2015, half the people in the world think innovation's going too fast. So there is a social problem, but there is a problem where we could do more, including with money, and it's on big network infrastructure. And that means connectivity, but also available capacity to do big data-driven research and deployment. And I think these areas are ones where we are seriously underweight in Europe.
Okay. Robin?
Through the history of innovation in the ICT area especially, there's always been a notion that we're either going too fast or too slow, but what is not discussed is that innovation not only has a rate of investment, but a direction. And it's the direction and the combinations of technologies. We've heard a lot today about 5G and fiber. So how will they come together? How will they complement each other? Will different parts of the world, Europe versus Asia versus North America, go at it in investment terms in a different way? And a complementary issue to that is today we've talked about the need for risk capital and investment. We haven't often talked about the fact that the way in which risk capital is made available in different parts of the world is enormously different. It's called the same thing. But venture capitalists, for example, in the United States may often have a much more hands-on mentoring role than they often have in Europe. So if you look around the world, it's not just the quantity of investment or even who's providing it, but how it's provided. And that then becomes an issue which, I would say this, social scientists have a lot to say about.
Okay, last question back there.
Thank you. I'm Bernardo Rodrigues. I work for London's European office, the office that represents the Mayor of London here in Brussels. Before Robert intervened on the infrastructure, I was going to make a plea as well not to forget the public investment. Robert touched on the infrastructure, but we should also think when we're talking about data and data as oil or data as blood, it does come from somewhere. Someone needs to collect it. If we look at all the innovation that's being driven, for example, talking now very selfishly from our perspective in terms of cities and how cities are, all the whole environment around smart cities, all the innovation that's coming out of it, how does it come? It comes from public procurement from a large scale of it. So it is about public money. We shouldn't forget that. I mean, the iPhone was mentioned earlier. The iPhone is a beautiful object, but if you look inside, it's full of public investment made as well. Yeah. Military investment and so on, it's public money. So we should, I don't think, and also when we're looking for ambassadors and what, why not look at cities? Why not look at regions? Why not look at other public entities, universities, clusters, which are doing marvelous work and perhaps going under the radar because it's tacky, because it's not sexy enough. So from that perspective, a plea to look back at the origins of where a lot of the investment is made. Give some credit to that investment, bring those actors around the table, talk to them more often, because they do hold the key to a lot of this. I mean, again, sorry, going back again to data. We have in London the London Data Store, 500 or 600, or I don't know how many data sets we have in there. It does take a lot of resources to work that, to work all that data, to make it available. And obviously people think, well, hang on, this is public resources we're using. These are companies which are then making money, certainly providing solutions to citizens, but they are making money out of that. Should put a value to this. What will that do to the circulation of the data? So all these issues are also in our mind as well. But again, look back to the public authorities, to the cities, to the people who are putting this out there, and bring them around the table for the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. A last comment?
Now this intervention of Bernardo shows that this subject, how to accelerate digital innovation, is could be a subject to a seminar or to a course. All things are changing in the world. I usually underline that when we accelerate particles, we create a quantum revolution. Now we are accelerating data and information. We are creating a cognitive revolution. Things now need to be looked in a new perspective, and all things need to be looked in a new perspectives. It's a new world that we need to address, and a new world of opportunities and also of some risks.
Okay, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this. And thank you. We will, one point, we've collected actually a really nice list of to-dos, recommendations in this, and we will be publishing that. If in the meantime you have other ideas that you didn't get to say or that you thought of afterwards, just email us, okay? And we'll include them, all right? So, Marilyn.
I won't take long, I just want to wrap up. Thank you all. Thank you to the partners of the conference, Huawei Technologies. Thank you to all the speakers. It's been a very intensive day, and I think you all greatly contributed to the quality of the discussion, so thank you for that. Thank you all in the room, and thank you also to the online audience. I think we got a terrific traffic on Twitter throughout the day, and I think I can speak on behalf of Huawei and Science Business saying that we want this discussion to keep going. And so next week, Tuesday, we'll have a special report with the conclusions from today's discussions. For those who don't read Science Business yet, go on the website. It's very easy to subscribe. And I think we've got drinks waiting for us upstairs. So thank you very much to all of you again. And let's go for a drink. Thanks.